Exercise 1. The critical distinction to be made between history and the natural sciences is that the standing of explanations put forward by historians is very much inferior to that of scientific explanation. It may be that scientific explanations are no more than provisional hypotheses, but they are for the most part hypotheses on which all people qualified to judge are in agreement. They may be superseded one day, but for the time being they represent the nearest possible approximation to the truth, and are commonly recognized as such. In matters of historical explanation, on the other hand, a scholarly consensus scarcely exists. The known facts may not be in doubt, but how to interpret or explain them is a matter of endless debate, as the example of the English Civil War illustrated. The faction hypothesis has not superseded the class conflict hypothesis or the ideology hypothesis. All are very much alive and receive varying emphases from different historians. Exercise 2. A growing body of knowledge has changed our perception of larval life and behavior. The classical view was of passive larvae, carried by ocean currents, settling when they reached some critical stage of competency. If a larva happened to be over appropriate habitat at that stage, its chances were good. If it was somewhere less favorable, such as over great ocean depths, then it was game over. We now know that larvae are much more active than this in their settling activities. Larvae are attracted to coral reef areas by both sounds and smells emitted by reefs, and move actively toward appropriate stimuli. Once over a reef, larvae show strong habitat preferences that differ among species. Some larvae will settle and then ascend back into the water column if conditions are inappropriate. Larval settlement is therefore not a parachute drop, but more of a bungee jump. Maintenance of high diversity on a reef demands protection of not just adult habitants, but also of settlement habitats, which are often different from and far removed from adult habitats. Exercise 3. Once we define who we are through an emotional commitment to our beliefs, we are likely to experience inner fear when those beliefs are questioned. This is the first form of intellectual cowardice. Questioning our belief can seem to mean questioning who we are as persons. The intensely personal fear we feel keeps us from being fair to opposing beliefs. When we consider opposing ideas, we subconsciously undermine them, presenting them in their weakest forms so we can reject them. We need intellectual courage to overcome self-created inner fear, the fear we ourselves have created by linking our identity to a specific set of beliefs. Another important reason to acquire intellectual courage is to overcome the fear of rejection by others, because they hold certain beliefs and are likely to reject us if we challenge those beliefs. This is where we invest others with the power to intimidate us. Many people judge themselves according to the views of others, and cannot approve of themselves unless others approve of them. Few people challenge the ideologies or belief systems of the groups to which they belong. This is the second form of intellectual cowardice. Both forms make it impossible to consider either our own or others' ideas fairly. Exercise 4. Human attention is always relative. When the activation of stimuli fails to attain a critical mass, we don't notice it. When a significant level of change occurs, or when sense experience corresponds closely to vestiges of previous experience in memory, we do. To cite a very simple example, one could mention the way the brain tunes out background static, such as the hum of an air conditioner, while actively attending to pronounced acoustic spikes such as the sound of coins being dropped onto a tile floor or a sudden burst of clapping. We tend to notice the coins and clapping more than the air conditioner because the first two meet the threshold for attracting attention, while the constant hum of the air conditioner would likely result in decreased neuronal sensitivity due to the effects of habituation. Consequently, some incoming sensory images go unnoticed, while others, having set off attentional tripwires, are allocated additional neural resources and break the surface of conscious attention. Exercise 5. In a wide range of animals, uncontrollable stressful events can induce a condition called learned helplessness. In mammals, it is associated with low general activity, poor learning, disorders of sleep and feeding, and reduced immune status. It is considered an animal model of depression in humans. Researchers investigate learned helplessness in Drosophila, showing that this behavioral state consists of a cognitive and a modulatory, possibly mood-like component. A fly, getting heated as soon as it stops walking, reliably resumes walking to escape the heat. If, in contrast, the fly is not in control of the heat, it learns that its behavior has no effect and quits responding. In this state, the fly walks slowly and takes longer and more frequent rests, as if it were depressed. This downregulation of walking behavior is more pronounced in females than in males. Learned helplessness in Drosophila is an example of how, in a certain situation, behavior is organized according to its expected consequences. Exercise 6. If I feel pain, or even a vague form of malaise, I need to communicate what that feels like, and to do that, I need to use modes of expression that are outside of my sensations. So you might ask me, on a scale of 0 to 10, how bad is the pain? At that moment, I'm being asked to, and attempting to, translate an individual experience into something socially knowable, something outside both me and you. In making that translation, however, I may also modify the original sensations. I say, I think it's about a 5. And you then say, well, that is reassuring since last week you thought it was an 8. I might then re-experience my condition in relation to this new depiction. As such, something outside of me has given shape and definition to something inside. If, on the other hand, I am unable to describe my sensation, to give it socially shareable form, I am left in a kind of incommunicable limbo, which brings with it additional forms of distress because it isolates me. I cannot get anyone to understand my pain. Exercise 7. One reason we're likely to attribute behavior to people's traits and dispositions is that dispositional inferences can be comforting. The twists and turns of life can be unsettling. A superbly qualified job candidate may be passed over in favor of a mediocre applicant with the right connections. A selfless Good Samaritan may be stricken with cancer and experience a gruesome death. Such events cause anxiety, and we're tempted to think such things couldn't possibly happen to us. But we can minimize perceived threats in several ways. One way is to attribute people's behaviors or life experiences to something about them, rather than to fate or chance. More broadly, by thinking that people get what they deserve, that what goes around comes around, or that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people, we can reassure ourselves that nothing bad will happen to us if we are the right kind of person living the right kind of life. Thus, we tend to attribute behavior and outcomes to dispositions, in part because there is a motive to do so. Exercise 8. The concept of place is characteristically the concept of an open region, in which things reside and in which relations between things can be established. The idea of place, as it operates in talk of a place or square within a town, provides a neat example of this. But such a place is itself constituted through the interrelation of the elements within it. The town square thus provides a bounded, oriented space within which the affairs of the town are brought into focus, in which particular buildings and activities take on a certain character and identity, in which individual persons are able to take on the role of citizens. But the character of the place is itself dependent on what is brought to focus within it. If we look to the larger region of the town as a whole, The character of the many particular places within the town is similarly dependent on the interrelation of places within the region as a whole, and the same is also true of entire landscapes. Thus, if one is to delineate the structure of a place or region, then what is required is to exhibit the structure of the region as a whole, as it is constituted through the interplay of the various elements within it. Exercise 9. In an American context, Jack Balkin has tried to explain law's resilience when faced with the interpretive claims of other disciplines. He argues, echoing earlier writers, such as Posner, that law is inherently weak as an academic field. It is highly susceptible to invasion by other disciplines. Although sociology is one such invader, the disciplines that, in the U.S., have recently been most successful in invading law have been economics, history, philosophy, political theory, and literary theory. Balkin claims that law is so easily invaded because it is less an academic discipline than a professional discipline. It is a skills-oriented profession, and legal education is a form of professional education. Law does not have a methodology of its own. It borrows methodologies from any discipline that can supply them. On the other hand, because law is researched and taught in settings that are never far from the professional demands of legal practice, it cannot be entirely absorbed by any other discipline. Its professional focus compensates for the lack of a purely intellectual one. Exercise 10. If you happen to disagree about sports, it doesn't mean that you can't work through this conflict. Every once in a while, invite your non-fan to sit down and watch the game with you. Perhaps you can try to teach non-fans about the background of the sport or how it is played. Be patient, because you may be about to hit one of their pet peeves. If the non-fan doesn't want to learn about sports, back off, but you may be surprised by his or her response. If this is a problem area in your relationship, here is a chance to turn the situation around and to show your significant other that you really do want to spend time together. With a little patience, you might win the person over to watching with you, and wouldn't some together time be a great outcome for an afternoon or evening, regardless of the outcome of the game itself? If you can show her what to look for, explain some of the more basic rules of the game and the story behind it, your non-fan may come around. New fans are created all the time, so there is always hope. But please, do not force the issue if they continue to fight it. Exercise 11. The modern concept of law and the modern sociological concept of society have common origins in the composite idea of the nation-state, brought to full realization in the revolutionary period of the late 18th century. In the shadow of this idea, law and society are almost mutually defining. Society is, for many definitional purposes, political society. That is, a territorially defined arena of social interaction, regulated by a specific political system. For example, British society, French society. Society is thus significantly delimited by the jurisdictional reach of legal systems. This, however, undermines the idea that law is in some sense a product or expression of society. One might put matters the other way around. Political society is a product of law. If the unity of society is fragmented, so too is that of law as a social phenomenon. Exercise 12. Cast your mind back to the first time you moved into a particular space. A room in college accommodation is a good example. You are confronted with a particular area of floor space and a certain volume of air. In that room there may be a few rudimentary pieces of furniture such as a bed, a desk, a set of drawers, and a closet. These are common to all the rooms in the complex. They are not unique and mean nothing to you beyond the provision of certain necessities of student life. Even these bare essentials have a history. A close inspection may reveal that a former owner has inscribed her name on the desk in an idle moment between classes. There on the carpet you notice a stain where someone has spilt some coffee. Some of the paint on the wall is missing. Perhaps someone had used putty to put up a poster. These are the hauntings of past inhabitation. This anonymous space has a history. It meant something to other people. Now, what do? A common strategy is to make the space say something about you. You add your own possessions, rearrange the furniture within the limits of the space, put your own posters on the wall, and arrange a few books purposefully on the desk. Thus, space is turned into place, your place.